Welcome, traveler.
Hello everyone, hope you're all well. Welcome back to another Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 video on the Aviator 268 channel. Today's video will be part of a series for the PMDG 737 startup to shutdown. Just a disclaimer, I am not a real world pilot, just a flight simmer who has been flying for a very long time. Having watched several videos about the 737 from real world 737 captains and just decided to share my flows for flying the aircraft. It is the hope that this video will help someone who is starting out to get the bird up and running in a reasonably short time. I'll be using a checklist created for the 737 series by James M. and Matthew A. from American Virtual Airlines. So without any further ado, let's jump right in. Once we get into the aircraft, we normally take a scan to make sure that there are certain things that are secured for the aircraft. So we start by checking the landing gear, make sure it's down, the speed brake lever is up, flaps up, the cutoff switches are in the off position, and the parking brake is set. Once we do that, then we can go ahead and power up the aircraft. But before we do that, my initial flow will start with the flight plan. So we're going to take it over to SimBrief. For those persons who are not familiar with SimBrief, SimBrief is an online-based flight planner that covers pretty much everything that you need in order to get your flight plan. So once you head over to SimBrief, if you do not have an account already, feel free to create one and get yourself set up. This video will assume that you already have one, so we'll jump right into the flight plan. Today is the flight we're going to take from Antigua to Barbados. I had initially done a flight plan before. We were going to walk through it by doing a new flight. So we go over here on the left side and click new flight plan. We'll input our airline, and from what we would have seen earlier, we're using the Caribbean Airlines, which call sign is BWA, and the flight number is flight 419, departing Alpha November Uniform. Bravo Golf India is where we arrive, and our aircraft type is a B738. You have the ability to either use the aircraft type, or if you would like, you can actually put variants depending on the registration if you so desire. You don't have to, but if you are a stickler for variation, a stickler for variant, then you would definitely put your information in here, create your own variant. And today we're using Niner Yankee Alpha November Uniform for Caribbean Airlines. Once you do that, it will auto-populate certain information. For example, it would auto-populate the cruise index and the registration FIN number and also the cell code codes. If not, you will get a generic registration and flight number. So we'll choose Alpha November Uniform today. Caribbean Airlines does not have a flight plan layout in this list, so we'll use the Lido version, which is really simple for anyone to understand. Because we're in the Caribbean, we're going to be using the kilograms unit versus pounds. So if you like to use pounds, feel free to do that. You just select them here, and you will see the changes reflected as you do so. But for this flight, we're going to use kilograms. We're going to depart out of Antigua on runway 07. We can check this little box to see the weather for today in Antigua is 090 at 7 knots, which is for runway 07. And the arrival into Barbados, winds 110 at 11. So runway 9 is the selected runway for arrival today. It's a short flight, so we're going to actually put in our cruise altitude. We're going to go to flight level 310, and our passengers will leave to auto, and that will populate itself once we click generate flight. Flight route, there are suggested routes that you can find here. Sometimes you may need to do some editing. You can also use, for example, flight aware, and you can type in the information here. Not all times you will get that information. However, this is one option that you can use. So it will be ANU to BGI. Click search, and you would see, just click on one of those. And in this case, there isn't a flight route. However, it's pretty standard that you have the Alpha November Uniform Alpha 632 to BGI, or you have the Upper Alpha 632. We're going to use the Upper Alpha 632 since we are going above flight level 240 in the Caribbean. So we use the Upper Alpha Airways, the Upper Airways. Our alternate today is going to be St. Lucia. So we put in UVF or TLPL, and we'll just go VOR to VOR. That is set. Once we're good, once we're happy, then we can, or one thing I forgot to mention is the time. You are free to change this time. If you want to depart at a specific time, you can change that, or you can leave it just as is. And then once you're finished and you're happy with everything that's here, you click generate flight. Once the flight plan has been generated, you would then see another window which tells you the flight information, flight number, call sign, departure, arrival, aircraft, departure time and date, the air time and the block time. You also get a flight summary, which is flight level 310, cost index 40, the distance, average wind, wind component. Then you also see which release. If you've done this more than once, you then get another number, several numbers, and it adds the next following number. So if we were to edit this, it will be release number 3 and so on. The AIRAC cycle, the layout or units, and if it's ETOPS or not. Then we have our load sheet, which tells us what our on-route fuel burn will be, our block fuel, number of passengers, 154 is a full boat for us today. Our cargo, the empty weight, what our payload is, total payload is, the estimated zero fuel weight, estimated takeoff weight, estimated landing weight, and then what our maxes are for this 737. Remember, this is in kilograms. You would see the same in pounds. Shows our route. Our ATC flight plan is also here. Those of you who like to fly online, you can simply press the pre-file at the top. Once you press the pre-file, you press that button, it takes you to another window, and you would then be able to send your flight plan off by clicking File Flight Plan, and that will be it. It's going to be an offline flight today, so we won't use that. If you have a Navigraph subscription, you can then open your charts from here. It will show you all the information you need for the departure airport, NOTAMs, and the like for each of the 3 airports, your departure, arrival, and your alternate. If you do not have SimBrief's downloader, then you can download the flight plan to whatever you desire. We're using the PMDG 737, so you would download the flight plan and the wind uplink. However, today we already have the downloader installed, so once we clicked generate flight plan, it automatically sent it to the downloader and to our aircraft. So it makes life easier. So if you don't already have that, I highly recommend that you download the SimBrief downloader, where it would just automatically set up your flight plan to your aircraft. Be advised, you will have to do further setup with the SimBrief downloader so that it goes to the different folders that you do. So once you click download, it doesn't matter what aircraft you're flying, it will go to all of the different aircraft that you have installed to the folders that where they're located. So once we're finished with this, we are good. We can check several things on this SimBrief. We can check the weather to see if there's any weather around. Of course, within Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, there isn't much in terms of weather. We don't have a weather radar on the 737, and that's a totally different discussion that we don't necessarily have to go into right now. But we can check the weather, we can check the winds. There's so many different things we can check here, turbulence and the like. Also, we can open and view the PDF here, which shows us what our flight plan looks like. So we have our planned fuel, we have the information here about our aircraft, our estimated zero fuel weight, and all of the weights. Other information that we need in terms of cruising, our cost index, distances, and so on. When we scroll to the very bottom of the flight plan, it also shows us our maps, which gives us a picture as to what we are going to be expecting as we fly down to Barbados today. Okay, so once that is set, we can then head back to the aircraft. Bear in mind, like I said, this is the flow that I would use before I even get on the simulator. I would set up my flight plan. So once I get to the aircraft, I have all of that already set up. Okay, so this aircraft has an EFB, so we're able to utilize that as well, especially for our performance and so on. To get our aircraft ready, we go to the overhead panel. We've already checked to make sure that we have our landing gear down, our speed brakes up, our speed brakes down, the flap lever up, and our cutoff switches in the off position, and we also have park and brake set. On the outside, we see that we have our chocks as well set up, and also the ground power unit is there, and we have our low pressure air also connected. So the aircraft is pretty cool for us as we enter for our startup. All right, so overhead, we will begin by turning on the battery switches, standby power, and emergency light switches. Then we will double check to make sure that we have our DC on battery, the AC on standby power, and we would then click ground power on to bring the aircraft alive. We'll wait a few seconds for everything to pop up. While we wait for that, go back into the overhead panel and we can begin our flows just to make sure that there's certain things. The first flight of the day, you would normally check for everything. So you will run the different tests to make sure that your alarms are done, your oxygen test, and your lighting test. So for today, we're gonna go ahead and start our IRS alignment as we wait. So we set left and right to nav. As we scan down the left side, after we would have checked this on, a few seconds later we can then turn on the yaw damper. Make sure that all of our pumps are in the off position. Scanning the second line, second section here, our cabin utility and IFE pads are on. The Gen 1 and Gen 2 are off for the time being, and our APU will remain off for the time being. We'll leave passenger signs off for now, and we'll turn on our window heat. Probe heat will remain off. We don't need any anti-ice. The engine 1 and 2 hydraulic pumps would remain on. Electronic pumps would be off for now. Then on the right side, we have the voice recorder auto, trim air is on, turn on our left and right recirculation fans. We'll leave the pack switches as they are, leave the altitude indicators as they are here, and we'll turn on our lights like so. At this point, our aircraft has been started up. As you can see, our displays are now lit. And the next thing we want to do now is to go across to our EFB. And we click the electronic flight bag to our tablet, click electronic flight bag. and we're going to request data from SimBrief. So the aircraft has been set up in the settings area where you can have your preferences set up here. And so my SimBrief information is already in, and it's also set to kilograms. So we're going to request data from SimBrief, and we'll see our flight details populate on the left pane here. Call sign is 419, aircraft is 9 Yankee ANU, type is 738. Our company route is Antigua to Barbados. This is our 0308. This is our distance, our cost index, average weight, and our alternate. We're to leave Antigua at 14:15, and we should arrive at 15:32. These are in Zulu time. We go to get our weather, so we click departure, Antigua pops up, and it should auto-populate right here. So today's the 28th at 1300 Zulu, and the wind is 090 at 7. Few clouds at 2,000 feet, and visibility is pretty clear. Temperature 30, pretty warm already at this time of the day. QNH is 1014, and there's no significant weather. For the arrival, weather, wind 110 at 11, visibility very good, and we have a scattered at 1,800. Temperature a little bit warmer down south, 31 degrees, QNH 1012, and no significant weather. Once we've done that, we can go across to our FMC where we can do our initialization. Before we do that, let's run the initialization checklist from American, and I will show you that right now. So here our parking brake has been set, battery switch is on, emergency lights guarded, DC voltmeter selector is on battery, AC voltmeter is on APU gen. If we were on the APU gen, we're on standby power still. As a matter of fact, I should have changed that, so it's now on ground power. Let's just double check here. Right, we're back to, so the AC voltmeter is on ground power. Electronic hydraulic pumps are off. Standby power is guarded. Standby power auto and guarded. Bus transfer auto guarded. Ground power is connected and on. Position lights on. Read switches are off, and APU switches are also off. We will not use the left pump and go any further with that because we are not on APU as yet. Alright, so we go to our FMC now, and so it's asking us to enter IRS position, so we'll do that. So we click on the left FMC, and in the PMDG they work independent of each other. So the FMC, we double check to make sure we have the correct model 737-800, the correct AIRAC. If you have a Navigraph account, your AIRACs are updated ever so often. And so this one is active from September 5 to October 3. And so we click pause in it, and we put in our reference airport. It is Tango Alpha, Papa Alpha. And we click enter there. Now we could use this information and put it into set IRS, or sometimes the gate does work. We're at gate 1, so let's see if it works. And it does. Now you will see that there's a difference between this coordinate point and the last position coordinate point. If you want to get the exact where the aircraft is, you click the next page and you click GPS left or right, whichever one you like, and you set the IRS position. And if you come back and look at our navigational display, if I will stop clicking buttons, we see that everything is now in place and ready for us to do the rest of our flight planning. After FMC, we now go to the route, and in the PMDG, once we have our reference airport in, we click it in the origin. And because we already did our flight plan, we're going to request our flight plan by clicking the line select 3 on the right side. We have SimBrief route in place, so we click SimBrief route, and you see it tells you which one you have ready. For the purpose of this display, we're not going to go through the GSX with it, so we don't go over time too long. We're already at 20 minutes, so we're just going to set our fuel, set our payload, and we also set our route. So we wait for this request to go through. On the right hand side, we go to FS Actions and we're going to click Payload, and we see that everything is populated in terms of our first class and economy, forward and aft cargo, our zero fuel weight, and our takeoff weight. Alright, so we load now. While this uploads. Alright, so it's now in. My preferred way of doing this now is to go to, instead of activating, I will go to departure and arrival. I'll pick the departure, select the runway, go back to index, select the arrival runway, and we're going to do the ILS Zulu runway 09, and we're going to take it from Venom. Now, before we go any further, let's go over to our Navigraph. Click on departure. Antigua does not have any departure SIDs, so we will take the airport parking information so we can see where we are, and that's our airplane on the map there. And if we had to return, then we would use the RNAV GNSS 07. And for the arrival, we choose our airport and parking, so when we get to Barbados, we can see where we are. There's no star, and the ILS that we're going to use is ILS Zulu runway 09. And as we just indicated, we're going to take it from Venom. Based on our route, if we now look at it, so we have our route in, we click route and go to the legs page. Before we click activate, we will check our route, switch it to the plan mode, give us a little bit of range, and we're going to step through the flight plan. So leave out of Antigua, Seacon, then to BGI, Barbados. And when we zoom in, we recognize that we will go Ghana, then Olido, then Alexa, then runway 09. If we look on our charts, we see Ghana here as the initial approach fix, then the Olido, then Alexa, then runway 09. Generally, when you have a discontinuity, so you check through to make sure that there are no discontinuities with your flight plan before you activate it. However, let me caution you. There may be times if you're flying online, especially if you're flying online, I would recommend that you leave the discontinuity in. For example, if you're flying into an airport that is controlled, air traffic control may vector you before you actually complete the entire approach. Therefore, it's better to allow them to vector you, so you leave that discontinuity in. If you don't, and you just allow it to fly the approach, for example, if I went ahead and changed this, the air traffic control could tell me otherwise, and we don't want to be in a situation where we get fussed at because we're not flying based on instruction. Since this is an offline flight, we can go ahead and remove the VOR. So let me go back here to the navigational display. And you see here that once I step through from BGI, we're going to remove that. So we're going to take Bannock and replace BGI. And so now when we step through, we recognize that we will go directly from Seacon to Bannock, then join the rest of the arrival. Once we're happy with that, we can turn it back to map view and click activate, then execute, and now it changes from blue dashed to a magenta line. Go back to the route and we go to performance in it. Now I do it from the right side, come to the left side. So based on our flight plan, our altitude is flight level 310 as we indicated before. So we put in flight level 310, cruise wind, we can see that here, which is 133/1. This will change once you request the winds. The top of climb outside air temperature is based on the altitude that you set in. If I put in 330, you will see that that also changes. So that's based on there, but you can manually change that. The transition altitude is automatically set based on your airport, so you don't have to worry about that. You can change it if you'd like, but it's set to what the standard that is there. Cost index is 40. Then reserves today, our reserve for the flight is 1.7. And our zero fuel weight, as we see here, is 59 tons, 59.6. And that gives us our gross weight of 66.2, sorry. And that is close enough to what we have here. Then we execute that. Then from here, we will go over to our, now that we have that information in, which is the load sheet is completed, we can go over to the flight tablet, click on the performance tool, and we click import from OFP if it's not already there. Select the runway 07, it populates the other fields. We will then import from the aircraft, which will give us our takeoff weight and our takeoff CG. We can leave it at optimum. Generally, 737s generally use flap 5, so it will more than likely take flap 5. Then you have the rating, leave it to optimum with a takeoff, takeoff 1, takeoff 2. No anti-ice is required, and we'll use pack on. Then we import the weather. So wind 090 temperature 31. If we click on the INHG here, inches here, it will switch over to hectopascals, which is 1014. Once these are populated, we can then click calculate. On the right side, it will tell you the acceleration height is 1500 feet, flaps 5, which was the optimum for this flight. Our N1 is going to be 93.8. Take off is our rating with a selected temperature of 52. Trim 4.6, V1 140, V2 1, correction VR 142, and V2 146. We can then take this information back to our FMC by then going to N1 limit. We can put the selected temperature. The temperature is 52. Then click it here. It changes the reduction here. And since we're doing takeoff, we don't have to touch anything else. If we were to do takeoff 1, then you simply just click takeoff 1 after you would have already put that in there. But we're going to use takeoff 52 degrees. I believe because of how hot it is, we need a little bit more energy from our thrust. So we use takeoff setting with a selected temperature of 52 degrees. We will go over to the next page, which is takeoff. We put in our flaps. Flap 5, then our CG, you can just double click or click on the line select key 3 and enter that. The next page, you can put in the information here. The wind is 090 at 8, I believe it was. Yes, 090 at 8. And the slope is 0. And then we see here that our takeoff speeds V1 140, VR 142, 146. So we can input VR 140 here. We do not have to take what's there. Then we can do 142, then 146. That completes the FMC setup for now. So in the ACP, the autopilot control panel, we then turn on our flight directors, then our auto throttle arm. We can now put our V2 speed in the speed window here, so 146. We put our heading to our departure runway heading, which is 073 here in Antigua. And now initial altitude out of Antigua, there isn't a set one that will be done by ATC. And for this flight, since we're going to flight level 310, we just go ahead and put flight level 310 in the window. At this point, we are almost ready for departure, almost ready for a pushback. What we want to do now at this point is to ensure that we set our radios. If you're flying online, then you would tune to the next frequency that's available, whether it's delivery, ground, tower, approach, or center. Since there is no ATC online right now, we'll do Unicom, which is 122.8. You will hear 122.8 depending on where you are. And we are good to go. The next step would now to go up in the overhead panel, and we want to turn on the forward pump. We then make sure that our passenger signs are on at this point. Then on this panel, we want to put on our electronic V hydraulic pump, and that would allow us to set our trim. We will set our trim to 4.6. So set our trim to 4.6, which is just about 5. Good. And we can set our auto brake to RTO, and we can now start the AP. Once the AP is started, then we will request pushback and push off the gate. That will be the end of this video. Until the next video, where we will push back, start up, and taxi to the runway. Hope this helps you, and I'll see you in the next one.